Hello, everyone. We are very excited that you are here with us today, and I am joined today by two of my amazing teammates, Ellen O'Gorman, who is one of our fantastic principal investigators and our head medical writer at Citruslabs. And then we have Travis Proctor, who is our director of partnerships. And today we're talking about an important topic. It's how to maximize your return on investment, your ROI, when you conduct a clinical study. And we increasingly see brands that conduct studies that are actually not making the most out of their clinical studies and clinical study results. And we will touch today on different study designs, what to do with your research findings, and also what a successful research collaboration looks like. And in case you don't know who I am, my name is Susanne Mitschke, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Citruslabs. And Citruslabs is the leading provider of decentralized clinical trials for brands. And we work with supplements, superfoods, cosmetics, and also pet health products. And the end product of a clinical study is typically a substantiated product claim. And in case you're interested in conducting your own research, you can contact us at hello@citruslabs.com or can visit our website at citruslabs.com. And before we start, some housekeeping. If you have any questions, just please put them into the Q&A box of Zoom or in the chat, and we will answer your questions at the end of this webinar. Well, Ellen and Travis, hello, and thank you so much for being here with us today. To start us off, can you quickly introduce yourselves? Ellen, you can start, and then Travis can follow.
Yeah, of course. So hello, everybody. As Susanne has kindly already said, I'm one of the principal investigators at Citruslabs. And I think at Citruslabs, we've conducted more than 250 trials that I've been a part of. And separate to that, my background is in health science and clinical research. And I'm just really looking to get forward to getting stuck into this today.
Awesome. Yeah. And hello, everyone. My name is Travis Proctor. I'm the director of partnerships here at Citruslabs. Typically, I'm the one working with you on the front end to kind of help get your study set up before it really comes over to the research team, kind of helping you decide, what study design makes the most sense, how we can kind of best achieve your goals. And my background's in operation partnerships, kind of getting projects up and running. And then I typically will hand things off to Ellen and her team after that front work.
Perfect. Thank you both. And I would like to quickly talk about different study designs and also methodologies, just to give us all, the background on that, because I think we will hear about that a little bit. And there are a ton of nuances to all of that, but big picture, there are three big different study designs. First one is perception studies, which are not very scientific, but still a very popular study design specifically for cosmetics. Then there are single group clinical studies, which are often referred to as pilot studies. And then there are RCTs, randomized controlled trials, that include, for example, a 2-arm double-blind placebo-controlled study or crossover study, for example. And then a big thing in study design is also if something is decentralized, which means that participants can stay in the comfort of their own home when they are part of a study, for example, what we do at Citruslabs, or if a study is on site, which means that they always have to go somewhere to participate in the study. And then you have different methodologies. The easiest way to collect data is questionnaires. And I believe that every study should include a questionnaire, but you should also add on to that, for example, with biomarkers, like all sorts of blood work, for example, or microbiome testing. And when people talk about microbiome, they often just mean stool, but you can also do microbiome of the skin, the scalp, or even vaginal microbiome, we are seeing a lot, and it's getting a lot more popular now as well. And then for cosmetics, for example, there are before and after photos and expert grading. And so, there's a lot more to methodologies than just questionnaires. Now that we learned a bit about study designs, Ellen, could you tell us what the key factors are to consider when choosing between different study designs like RCTs, or, choosing between a crossover study, for example, and a single group study?
Yeah, sure. I think that ultimately this decision will come down to each brand individually. And a really big factor can also be the amount of research that has already been conducted in your product or in some of the ingredients that are in your product as well. So if you have a brand new product, nothing in it has ever really gone through a lot of rigorous testing, you're not super certain about kind of what the results are going to be or which exact area you should be kind of really focusing in on for your product. In that situation, perhaps a single group trial or a kind of a pilot design, like Susanne has mentioned, would be more appropriate, where you're getting some of that more preliminary data in a smaller group. It's slightly more cost effective. You still can get some amazing claims from it, but it kind of directs you towards the path of a larger trial and can kind of help you to decide what are the next steps in terms of investigation. Should you be looking at some more expensive or costly measurements like biomarkers, blood tests, etc.? And should you be investing in a placebo-controlled or in general a controlled trial as well?
Yeah, I agree. And I think Ellen is touching on a really important topic because specifically when there's not a lot of research around an ingredient, for example, or brands don't know what they should research, often they are using like this spray and pray approach and they're testing a lot. And then you're testing a lot that you don't know, works or not against the placebo. And, then study results sometimes, brands feel disappointed about their study results when they tested so many different things. And, just maybe one or two things were significant, right? So yeah, if you have no idea, then rather stick to a single group study. I agree. And Travis, could you also tell us a little bit about, how budget and also timeline could, basically decide what type of study you should run?
Yeah. A bunch of those things that Ellen just mentioned are often things I relate to our customers, because I'd say for most brands, the number one driving factor as far as what study design you are going to choose is going to be what type of budget you have to run your study. Because, when we come down to the consumer perception studies, those are going to be the most cost-effective ways to generate claims. And when you are a newer brand and really kind of your main goal is to, hey, we really say you're launching a new product, right? You're a new brand with a new product. Maybe it doesn't have a lot of research on behind it, like Ellen mentioned, but your main goal is really to say, hey, we really just want to be able to launch this product with some claims that we can put out in the marketing atmosphere to show our product works, right? Then consumer perception, single group studies, they serve that purpose great. Also, one thing I think people don't take into consideration when they are thinking about running a randomized controlled trial is placebo development, and how that actually can kind of be a complicated pain in the butt process for a lot of people. And also, of course, that does add costs to your study as well, because it always sounds great to want to run the randomized control trial, but it might not be the most cost-effective, time-efficient way to do things for you, depending on where you are in product development, depending on where you are in product launch as well. So that's something I think people kind of don't really think about a lot when they're in that process is, hey, if I am going to run that randomized control trial, now I have to also go through the process of creating a placebo, and to kind of conduct the highest level of randomized control trial, that placebo needs to kind of be really, really tight, right? You want to make it as close to that actual product as possible. So it is kind of that highest level of research.
And
Absolutely.
also,
I think, oh yeah.
Sorry, Susanne.
No, go ahead, Ellen.
Kind of say no to placebos, because obviously we love a placebo controlled trial. It is the gold standard. But in a case where you are looking at objective measurements like blood tests, there can be an argument that the placebo-controlled trials aren't necessarily as valuable in that case. Whereas if you're only using questionnaires, the placebo effect is real, and those are very subjective and can be influenced by a lot of psychological factors. And in that scenario, having this placebo control really adds a lot of robustness to your design. But if you have a single group study and you're looking at very objective blood tests, microbiome, then in that case, I can see an argument for there being less so much of a need for placebo.
Makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, what Travis said about placebo development, I think a lot of brands underestimate that how much work it is to actually get the exact taste, the exact color, especially when a part of your ingredient, for example, if you have something like turmeric and maybe it's a turmeric powder, like how do you mimic that? Because it should taste like very similar. So, that's all stuff to consider. But sticking with placebos and adding in control groups, Ellen, we often hear, about placebos in clinical trials. We often hear about control groups in clinical trials. How do you actually determine if you actually choose a placebo group or a control group, for example, and how do you determine what's more appropriate?
I think that is a really good question. And I think first to maybe just establish the difference between placebo and a control, because sometimes people use these words interchangeably and that's not necessarily correct. When we're talking about a placebo, we're basically talking about a fake product. It doesn't have any active ingredients. So, people talk about sugar pills or sugar water. That's what a placebo is. It should not have any effect on the participants physiologically. But it does provide that psychological input of I am taking something or I am using something. Whereas a control is you're giving people something that does also have an active ingredient. It can be kind of an active comparator where you could use maybe just the active ingredient without anything else involved, or you could be using a competitor product. The benefits of using competitor product or the standard of care treatment, what's usually used and what's accepted as effective, is that you're giving people an effective product and you're giving them effectively a placebo too, because they are also taking something as well. Now, this is a very robust trial design, but perhaps for brands that are more early in their journey, this might not be something that is most appropriate because it is really putting your product to the test against something that is usually proven to work. On the other hand, you have a placebo where you are just giving people something that is inactive, but it allows for your comparison of if people think they're taking something, then is your product matching up to that? So I think it is a decision for me that depends on where someone is in their journey of their development of their product.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Also, control group. I think control groups, obviously, in recent times we have done a lot of studies also on weight loss, for example, and some of the control groups were just using we're following CDC recommendations, for example, on healthy diet. So that could also be, control group. But yeah, competitor product is popular as well. But again, what Ellen mentioned earlier with blood testing, for example, right? If both, for example, if you're a vitamin brand and your competitor is also a vitamin brand, it is very unlikely that there will be statistically significant results between your product and your competitor if both have active vitamin ingredients, for example, vitamin D, and you want to see, a difference. Maybe there is a slight difference, but it's very unlikely that this difference will be statistically significant. Is this right, Ellen?
Yes, I think you have to be very, very confident that your product is going to significantly outperform the competitor or the standard of care. That's the risk that there is associated with those.
Absolutely. And Travis, when we talk about RCTs, randomized control trials, many people don't know, that double-blind placebo-control studies are, for example, a form of RCTs. We had that conversation a couple of times where people told us that, well, I'm looking for an RCT. I'm not looking for an RCT, right? I'm looking for a double-blind placebo control study. And that's obviously, a misconception. And what do you think are like other misconceptions about clinical research and, health and wellness in general? And how can these misconceptions also impact study outcomes?
So a couple things. So number one, I think people they're of course excited to test their product and run a clinical research study, but you touched on this a little bit earlier. Kind of people want to test as much as possible, right? They kind of want to spray and pray and hope they find good results throughout their product testing. I think a misconception is to try and test as much as you possibly can in different areas, where in reality, it's best to kind of pick a more focused, targeted research to try and then drill down on that and come out with more successful claims that way. It's going to be a lot easier for you to find statistically significant claims if you're kind of narrowing your area of focus instead of trying to test as much as possible, right? Because then you're likely to maybe come out with a ton of lightly but not really significant results. Whereas if you narrow that focus, you have a much better chance of coming out with some more statistically significant results that are going to be more impactful. Another thing I will also say about kind of misconceptions around research is how they have to be like these studies have to be conducted at research sites at universities and things like that to be able to actually be valid. That's not at all true, right? Any type of research where it's conducted in university or decentralized is still very, very valid as long as you have the right people working on it and you're going about the right way of testing things. So I think those are kind of some things people often think is like, well, hey, this is people are doing this from home. That's not necessarily a clinical research study, and that's just not correct. Right? It's all about who's the research that's actually being conducted, who's driving that research, how the study is designed, and how things are analyzed at the end.
Ellen, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting first point that Travis has made, around this approach of trying to get as many claims or look at as many things as you can. Because the way I think about that is thinking about your ideal participant for your trial. We want to find someone who is going to potentially reap the benefits of your product, so therefore may have the concerns that you're looking to target. If you're a brand and you want to say, okay, we need someone who's going to experience weight loss, a reduction in blood pressure, but also acne is going to improve. They're going to feel less fatigue. They're not just going to be better. They're going to have less headaches. That's a lot of issues for one participant to have. So we are at risk then of finding participants that are relatively unhealthy. They have quite a lot of concerns, and they're potentially not the best person that's going to experience an improvement from your product. We're in a much better situation where we can kind of hone in on the things that are more important and find participants that are only experiencing those few key issues.
That is very well said. I could not agree more. And one thing I also want to touch on is communicating research findings. I see there also a lot of misconceptions. A lot of brands, they are just, stating their claims with that little asterisk of, based on a third-party study. But they are not giving consumers more information about the study, like who conducted the study, what was the sample size, what were the inclusion-exclusion criteria that you briefly touched on, Ellen, right? But really, brands should be proud of themselves. They should celebrate their research, and many of them are creating science pages with more information. For example, we are also seeing an increasing number of brands opting for publications in journals, which is amazing to see, because then, research gets peer reviewed and it shows, how rigorous the study really was. The minimum that brands are typically opting for, though, is they're looking to put their study on clinicaltrials.gov, like a clinicaltrials.gov entry that the study has happened. And, as a result of specifically these publications and journals, we are also seeing press releases in, fantastic news outlets. And would any of you add anything to that list what brands should do with their research apart from, putting it on a website and knocking on wood, publishing it in a journal, and then obviously as a result getting like press and stuff?
Yeah, I think that's quite an exhaustive list, Suzanne. And I think that the one thing that strikes me the most when we talk about kind of sharing your results is sometimes brands are kind of worried that not all of their results are amazing. So they might have a selection of absolutely amazing improvements, and then a few parameters or a few things we tested that didn't really show amazing results. So they kind of feel reluctant to share everything because they don't want people to see some of the results that perhaps weren't as amazing as they had hoped. But one thing we have to consider is this transparency of sharing these results. We are sharing everything, and that really, really attests to a brand's credibility. It also shows all aspects of the study design that you kind of have nothing to hide, kind of here's everything we tested. And in this age now of these consumers that are more kind of research orientated or more educated and technologically savvy, that they are looking for this, I think regardless of what your results are, having them somewhere showcased just really can't do any damage to your brand image at all.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's actually, sorry, Travis, just wanted to add, I think it's actually also helping to keep, the FTC and also FDA in check, right? Because the more information brands put on their website about the study, or even like some of them are even just putting the entire study report on the website and then making claims based on that, there's nothing really to argue that there's any deceptive behavior that could trick consumers buying a product.
Yeah, and that's kind of exactly where I was going to go with that is like transparency is the best policy in my opinion, right? And even if something isn't ideal, when you are presenting even the non-ideal results, you're basically showing, hey, we have absolutely nothing to hide here, right? We're not trying to deceive everyone. We're sharing absolutely everything we did. And hey, you conducted a clinical research study. Be proud of that, shout it from the mountaintops. Like whether results were exactly what you wanted or some were, some weren't, that's still something to be proud of because you were willing to put yourself out there and you're willing to put your product on the line and say, hey, we believe in this and we want to prove this product works. So I think transparency is probably the best policy that brands can go by. And Susanne, like you said, I mean, the more you present publicly, the less likely the FDA and FTC are going to come knocking at your door for accusing you of being kind of misleading customers or anything to that effect.
And Ellen, obviously you have to analyze data in order to, make claims. And what, in your opinion, what are, some common mistakes brands make when actually, interpreting and reporting their clinical trial data?
I think that this is a tricky one because clinical trial data is not easy to interpret. It is
Mhm.
complicated. And obviously at Citruslabs, in our reports, we are very aware of this and we do try to make these as accessible as possible for anybody. But it is a complicated concept in general. The thing that I find that sponsors or brands are kind of missing out on the most is immediately just focusing on these claims of 75% of people have this improvement, or just focusing on those really percentage-based claims. From a research perspective, we are way more interested in our claims that are based on our statistical analysis. So these are when you're seeing things like there was a statistically significant improvement in XYZ, whatever that symptom is. Now, this is based on our equations that we conduct on our statistical analysis, which basically says that the likelihood of this result happening is not happened by chance. So there's less than a 5% chance that it happened kind of randomly. So we can really attribute that change to the test product. So for us, those are the best claims. But I often find that perhaps they are the claims that are slightly more difficult to decipher because they are based on these statistical analysis, and therefore a lot of brands are a lot more focused on the percentage-based claims.
Yeah, I think, obviously the percentage-based claims everyone knows what they mean,
Yeah.
right? Um, and yeah, I'm also getting more excited, when I see statistically significant, because especially when there's a placebo involved, because then it actually means that, there is a difference, an actual difference between placebo and test product.
Yeah, exactly.
And I also want to talk about finding the right research partner. Obviously, there are companies like Citruslabs, CROs, contract research organizations, and then Travis already mentioned it. Some brands are also thinking about running studies with universities, for example. And obviously, I'm a bit biased, but we do have, anecdotally, we do have clients that conducted studies with universities before. And for most of them, it actually did not end well. Didn't end well in terms of budget, didn't end well in terms of timeline. But one of our clients, in particular, a university actually lost their entire blood work for their study because they stored them wrong. And then, they essentially had to conduct the entire study again with also different participants. So that was not ideal. But Travis, what criteria should brands consider when actually selecting a research partner like a CRO for their clinical trials?
Yeah, so of course, number one, I think for every brand is you want to make sure someone can test something that, can conduct a study that's within your budget, right? Because a lot of CROs out there are going to, especially the more traditional ones, and maybe they don't have a focus on brands. They are focused more on typical traditional pharmaceutical studies, so they're not going to be budget friendly for you, and they're not going to be able to fit a study within your budget. They're probably going to charge you, $500,000, and then timeline as well, right? So timeline is something that I know is very important to a lot of brands. Hey, we're launching this product. We want to make sure we have, we have press associated with this product launch. We want to make sure we have the study results in time for that launch, right? So someone who's going to be able to actually work in the timeline you need them to work to, right? Someone that's not going to take, 3 years to conduct your study with an 8-month study period and 40 participants, right? Someone that's able to work on your timeline. Also, someone that is going to let you own your data, I think, is something that's actually very important as well. So that's one of the things that we're very conscious of. We want to make sure our sponsors own their data, right? So I think there's other partners out there that you'll work with where you don't own your study. So you can't publish your study. You don't own the data to it. So that's another thing I think is very, very important to consider as well. But then also, like I said, you really want to make sure the partner you're picking has experience working with brands, because a lot of those other CROs aren't going to be focused on brands, and they're not going to treat you like a brand. They might be treating you more like a pharmaceutical drug trial instead.
And would you add anything to what Travis said?
No, I think what Travis has said with that emphasis on finding a CRO who has worked with other brands and similar to your brand, and making sure that you feel confident that your CRO has experience in the area that your product is in.
Great. All right. Last thing for both of you. Ellen, you can go first. What advice would you give to brands that are new to clinical research to help them navigate the complexities of study design and also execution?
I do think it boils down to finding the right CRO that you can trust, and that you can lean on for this advice and to ask the questions. And I think that's also important, is ask the questions. I don't think any of us at Citruslabs or anywhere else mind at being asked 100 questions for our brands and our sponsors to feel comfortable and understand what's going on. And if you're not sure about, who you should be recruiting or what your target population should be, your claims, ask your CRO, ask who the principal investigator is, use their experience to your benefit and find out what you should be doing and what you should know.
And I think to add to that, you should also trust your CRO. to make the right decisions, because we are all on the same boat, right? We all want our the brands we work with to succeed.
Exactly.
Travis, what is your advice?
So kind of the main word you have on the screen there, collaboration, right? Find someone that is actually willing to collaborate and willing to listen and willing to kind of take your input on the study and how you want it to be run, right? You know, we always try and make sure, you know, we're the experts in this in running the studies, but we want to make sure we're also conducting the studies our customer wants us to conduct. So that's something I think that's very important. Is there are other partners out there that you'll work with. They'll just kind of take your skeleton of what you want and they're just going to go run a study without really your input. So find someone that is willing to collaborate with you, is willing to let you have input on the way the study's conducted. But at the end of the day, like Susanne said, you do want to make sure you're picking someone that you do trust to conduct the research. But I would say collaboration is a big thing. We pride ourselves on our collaboration a lot of times, and you know, making sure we're driving a study that is going to achieve the results our customers want. So that's one of my big things is make sure you find someone that's willing to listen to what you want and willing to kind of create that study and able to create that study that you want as well.
Fantastic. That was some really good advice and some really good talk. Thank you so much. And that brings me to the end of today's webinar. And I think we are now ready for your questions. And while you type in your questions, I just quickly wanted to let you know about our next webinar on July 18th. As always, 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time, where we have an AMA at Ask Me Anything with Regulatory Counsel, FDA and FTC expert Heather Bustos, and our principal investigator, Dr. Swathi Varanasi. And you can ask them all of your pressing questions about clinical research, product claims, and really whatever interests you in that whole world in a no pressure situation. You can just scan and register. And also, if you are interested in conducting your own clinical studies, you can reach out to us at hello@citruslabs.com, or you can just pick any of these emails. You can email Ellen, Travis, you can also email me, and you can also go on our website, citruslabs.com. Now let's see, do we have any questions? I don't think we have any questions, guys. That was great. All of you did a good job. Travis and Ellen.
Awesome.
Let's just wait maybe one more minute to see. Maybe it's a longer question. All right. I think that should be it. Well then, thank you very much, everyone. And also thank you, Travis and Ellen, for, oh, I think we have a, oh no, it's just a thank you. All right. Well, thank you for being here. Yeah, thanks, Travis and Ellen, and for participating. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their day. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Bye.
Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.